Hello friends and welcome to Generation Pixel. My name's Stuart and today, well, I've got a confession to make. In my over 40 years of video game experience, there is one console I have managed to neglect, and it just happens to be this. So today I'm going to remedy that by playing some NES and ranking some NES. So stay tuned. Now quite obviously I couldn't, dedicate the 30 plus years to going back and playing the entire back catalogue of the NES. So I had to devise a list. A list that would be fair to the NES, but also one I could compare not just to modern gaming standards, but to the gaming standards of the time. And the first game on that list could be none other than Super Mario Bros. Now as I've said, I'm not going to judge these games based on modern standards, although some of them do hold up to that. And I'm also going to judge the game based on when they were originally released in Japan. And for Super Mario Bros, that was 1983. And let me tell you, for 1983, Super Mario Bros was well ahead of the curve. Visually, it's absolutely stunning, and its audio standards are fantastic. But enough of the video and audio qualities, how does it play? Well, quite frankly, ahead of its time. Yes, of course it had the old school, extremely tough learning curve. And quite frankly, for the hour or so that I played for this video, I would quite happily say take your Sekiros, your Dark Souls, your Demon Souls and just put them straight in the bin. Because if you want tough and yet rewarding, then Mario Bros is the way to go. Outside of the arcade scene, which we can't really compare home consoles to, Nintendo's launch offering of Super Mario Bros was superb. And to be frankly honest, I can't think of any games at the time that would have stood shoulder to shoulder to it. But if you're going to play it, you're going to die. And you're going to die again, and you're going to die again. But that was just the nature of the beast back then, rather than the niche genre that we see the Souls-like games fall into nowadays. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't completely perfect. Some of the controls I feel let the game down a bit. Mario I found was just a tad too slidey on jumps. I wasn't really a fan of not being able to scroll backwards either, which the machine could easily have coped with. But for every slight downside in the game, there is a massive upside. And just one off the top of my head is how many secrets are in the game. Now secrets weren't a rare commodity, not even back then, but the amount of secrets and how well executed they were, I found to be quite frankly mind-blowing. So well done Mario. So as for ranking Super Mario Bros, I'm going to happily put it into Tier A. Now I can hear many people saying, why not Tier S? Well quite simply, it's a preference thing. I can't think of any platformer games I would put into Tier S at all, and not many, especially from that time, that I'd put into Tier A. So Super Mario can hold his head high in that Tier A bracket, although he won't have much company from many other platformers. The second game on my list was The Legend of Zelda. I chose this game quite simply because, like Mario, it's a Nintendo staple. You would have to have been sleeping under a rock for at least 40 years not to know what Zelda is, or what Zelda represents in the gaming landscape. Now I have played other Zelda games before, just not on the NES. And of all the games that I'd picked to play for this video, this was the one I was most looking forward to. Yet unfortunately, it was the one that most disappointed me. Now I know it's a classic, and I know it's well loved. And I don't know whether it's due to the fact that the game is so highly hyped, or the expectations that I had for the game impacted on how I actually played when I finally got round to it. But for me, I found it quite sparse. It didn't seem like there was a great deal to do. And I don't feel that the game led you in any meaningful way as to what you were supposed to be doing. Now I'm not saying that I only enjoy games that hold your hand through the entire experience, but I'm not sure that the NES really had the power to execute the idea of what was behind Zelda. And I think in retrospect, that's a fair assumption considering how well the Zelda games have moved on. Also graphically, I found it just okay. Nothing too special for the time, and maybe just a little bit subpar. The music, however, was phenomenal, and to be fair, I couldn't get that earworm out for days. But for an action RPG, it didn't have enough to hold my attention, and I don't think back then I would have invested a great deal of time in it, as there were other options and probably slightly better options at the time. So due to that, I'm going to have to put Zelda, or The Legend of Zelda, into category C. But before you start freaking out that I've put Legend of Zelda into category C, understand I realised the impact the game did have at the time, and that impact was enough for them to continue to develop the Zelda games, and are making some fantastic Zelda games right up until today. Game number 3 that I chose was Batman. And I chose Batman because it was ported to many other systems at the time. Now the first thing I want to say about Batman is the loading screen, which was fantastic. It gave me goose pimples and I couldn't wait for the game to start so I could get into it. Unfortunately, that's where the whole thing seemed to fall apart. Fantastic loading screen, but the game itself was poor at best. And to be fair, I am absolutely not basing my ranks on the games that we can play today, on the machines that we have today. I'm basing it on the machines we had back in the late 80s, and the direct ports of that game to those other systems. And to be frankly honest, the Batman versions on the other machines at the time, the micro consoles and the like, were far superior in gameplay, much more complex, much more engaging, and even I find this time that Nintendo missed out in the sound design and music. Now, unlike of course Mario Brothers and The Legend of Zelda, I would not go back to playing Batman. To be honest, I don't feel like it deserves another shot. And for that very reason, I'm afraid it goes down into my bottom tier, to rot away while I play much better versions on the games and on sometimes much weaker systems. For the fourth game, again I decided to pick a game that I could compare more directly with other machines of the time, and the game that I chose was Top Gun. Arcade flight sims were quite big at the time. They were available on a host of different systems, and of course in the arcades. As I said, I won't judge based on arcade quality machines, because of course that wouldn't be fair. That would be like comparing PlayStation 1 with a PlayStation 5. But very much like Batman, Top Gun really did fail to inspire me. It kinda gave me the impression that Nintendo with the NES were trying to push out games the machine just wasn't capable of. Now I haven't played enough other titles on the NES to properly say one way or another that the machine just couldn't handle Top Gun, or that perhaps it was just a badly designed game. But for what seems to be a fairly basic set of in-game mechanics, Top Gun just doesn't perform at all. The flight's clunky, the controls are awkward, and no, again, like Batman, I won't be returning to Top Gun, because like I've said, at the time there were better machines, or at least comparable machines, producing better quality versions of games like this. So Top Gun is going to fly right down and join Batman in the bottom tier. Sorry Top Gun. For the fifth and last game, I chose another multi-port game, this time Double Dragon. Now everybody knows Double Dragon. If you're as old as I am, you played it in the arcades first, and those arcade versions were ported to the microcomputers and the consoles of the time, and on to later consoles, and are still producing games of that style today. And as for the NES port of Double Dragon, well, this is how I feel. Visually, again, really nice. And the sound design, again, to Nintendo's quite high standards. But again, it seems to fall down on the gameplay. Now, as this was the fifth game that I'd played, I was starting to remember the drawbacks of having controllers with only 2 buttons. At the time in Scotland, we mainly played on micro home computers, so games that required multiple button layouts were catered for because we had a keyboard. So taking that into consideration, I gave Double Dragon a sort of second go, but unfortunately I don't think it was down to the controller. For some reason I found Double Dragon in the NES just a little too simple, and I don't know why Nintendo had done that. They were catering to a generation of gamers that were used to tough as nails games. Perhaps they were compensating just a little bit too much for the awkwardness of having to use the Nintendo 2-button controller. but on the whole it just seemed to distract from the enjoyment of the game. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who appreciated that it wasn't quite as tough as other games of the time, but for me, I think they would have been better focusing on less clunky controls and a little bit tougher gameplay. On the whole, I would go back to it now and again though, I won't lie. It might not stand up compared to some of its contemporaries, but I'm going to slot it into Tier C. A game that if I never played again, it wouldn't upset me greatly, but a game that if I picked up, I would give it half an hour or so. Well, that brings us to the end of my Nintendo newbie video. Now hopefully I'll do more videos like this, as I did enjoy my time with the NES, despite the fact that Super Mario Bros. Was the only game that really piqued my interest. But of course, I'm well aware that as the machine grew in age, the quality of games also grew, so I look forward to that. And if anyone's watching this video, well, thank you firstly, and secondly, if there's any games I should be playing, let me know in the comments. But for now, au revoir, bye bye, play Nintendo. Bye.